My name is Rachel Berard. I work for Summit County in the Lands and Natural Resources Department, and I am the Program and Project Administrator. Thank you all for coming. This is our first Roots of Conservation Growing the Conversation event. We're going to turn this into a quarterly conservation education series. So this is the inaugural event, and hopefully we'll just learn how to bring more people into this conversation and really get this going on behalf of the county. So there are lots of partners that are involved, and we just want to continue to highlight those partners as we go along throughout this series. But we have a couple folks that have come to speak today. So we're going to have Jess Kirby, the Director of Lands and Natural Resources, speak for a bit. And then we've got Lauren from Summit Land Conservancy, and Michaela is back there tabling. We've got speakers Wes Sidaway and Colby Pace coming in. Thank you. We also have some members of our Open Space Advisory Committee. So we have Dick Stoner and Bridget Hayes back there. And I just want to thank Bridget and Eamon for helping from our communications team. And we really just want to bring people here today to talk about conservation easements in general. So what is a conservation easement, and some background to that. Some of you might be really familiar with that. Some of you might not be. And then we want to bring in some opportunities for putting your land under conservation easement and what that might entail. And then we have Summit Land Conservancy, who are really the experts from the land trust on that end. And then we have some landowners that will speak to you about their experiences with conservation easements and working with these partners as well. So with that, I can turn it over to Jess.
Thanks, Rachel, for the introduction. This is our Roots of Conservation conversation, growing the conversation. This was a council goal for us, for my team this year, was to tell our story better. We've got the open space bond that we're working with. We've got lots of partners out there, but we're not doing a great job of celebrating our successes and talking to our community about what we can do for the future and how do we keep this momentum going. And so this is kind of the root of, pun intended, of this conversation. And I'm just very grateful to have you all here and to participate in this event, this inaugural event. So real quick, my agenda, just to kind of talk to you about what is the county's goal in conservation? Where are we at? How do we bring the funding in? What partners do we have? The advisory boards are a huge piece of this opportunity. And so I'll go through the different advisory boards we have and the different funding streams that they have, and what successes we have and what's next. And then I'll pass it off to Summit Lands Conservancy. So first of all, what does the County Lands and Natural Resources Department do anyway? We are a new department to Summit County. We were originally brought on about 3.5 years ago. Prior to that, our sustainability office was dealing with land use issues with our planning department, and it was kind of a piecemeal, combobbled situation that the county was dealing with. And Tom Fisher, right before he left, just saw the need to put some vision around how we treat our natural resources in our county and how we look at preservation, knowing that it is such a high priority for our community countywide. So my department does everything from land and water rights. We look into water right issues. We look into the water rights the county owns. We work with habitat and land use. We guide different kinds of treatments with forest health, watershed resilience. The folks in this area might be familiar with the Weber Watershed Project that we're doing up at the headwaters of the Weber to put resilience around that headwater stream that goes down to the Great Salt Lake and is our lifeblood of water for the Weber River. And then the natural resources programming, which this is a big piece of here, but also developing programs around protection and conservation of those resources. And then wildlife conservation. We work very closely with the Department of Wildlife, Safe People, Save Wildlife, and landowners in themselves to talk about wildlife-friendly fencing and how can we design, I work with my internal teams on how we can design different roadways that we're bringing in and make those wildlife-friendly too. And where could we consider an overpass for wildlife corridors? And how do we purchase land to create corridors so that our wildlife is not being hurt by the development that is coming in, they're going to be hurt by the development that's coming in, but how can we make it the least amount of hurt possible? But today we're here to talk about the last two items, which is the land stewardship piece component of our job, which is looking at land stewardship of our lands and preserving our rural community and our mountain character. Those are the rural community and mountain character are one of the things that comes out of so much of our visioning that we do at the county. Folks want to keep why they lived here, why they were born here, why this place looks the way it is. How can we keep it the way it is going forward? Development is coming. We can't not say that. But how can we work with the development and make sure we get that character and keep that character as we go forward so that our kids and their kids have something to live for and have a livelihood that they can have like we all did. And then conservation in agricultural areas, we acquire, we protect, we enhance, we restore, but we work with both on county lands, but we also work with private lands, which I don't think a lot of people know. We work collaboratively with partners across boundaries. We work with the Forestry Fire State Lands Office. We work with our state and federal partners to get what's called landowner consent. And that's the one thing you have to have before you take the next step. But first off, just to give you a little bit of history on what Summit County has done. So right now we have got nearly 100,000 acres of protected land that has been put under conservation easement or deed restriction by a county, city, or private entity. And honestly, that is unheard of for Utah. We are leading the way on this. Summit County should be the model on how to do this. Every one of you should be proud because you have all voted for bonds that support this, and that is how we get this work done. In addition to the lands that are protected by the county, city, and private areas, we have federal lands. It's about 44% of our county, and then we have about 2.3% of state. But that 8% of what we have protected on our own is everything on the map that is not blue or green, or the light gray. I should say the darker gray is protected, but the light gray is not. So everything that you're seeing on there that with color is protected in some way. And I should put a little hashtag there that does include golf courses. Golf courses are habitat. Who hasn't seen an elk sitting out on the golf course in the middle of the winter? Ski areas are also habitat. And developed recreations such as parks and fields, those are also habitat sometimes, whether we like it or not. So those are in there. But it does not include areas of greenbelt, and it does not include agriculture protection properties. Those are a little bit different. They don't come with like overarching deed restrictions or conservation easements, but they do have different designations, and happy to talk to you guys about those too after, but I'm assuming this crowd knows what I'm talking about there. So how did we break this down with Summit County? So we have got, like I said, 8.3% of our land is protected, but of that, 58% of that is in eastern Summit County, 33% of it is in the Snyderville Basin, and 8% of it is in Park City. And so while you look at the map and you see a big chunk of color over on the west side, the majority of large properties that are in protection are on the east side. And that is because of the lifestyle and the family lands that are out here on this side of the county. And then when you break it down a little bit further, 58% of those it gets a little weird with the numbers, but 58% are in agriculture, considered agricultural protection, and 42% of those are considered open space protection. So we're almost 50-50 in our county. But when you start looking a little bit deeper, you'll see that 98% of that is agriculture is on the east side. Only 1% is on the west side. So there is starting to be a split on how we protect lands, even though we're still protecting lands. So jumping into the advisory boards, how do we get to this protection? We have had two sustaining advisory committees for a very long time. I don't have the dates of when they were in the inception, but at least from 2004 and on. One was BOSAC being the Basin Open Space Advisory Committee. That was one of the first advisory committees to run a bond in Summit County, but those funds were tied only to the boundaries of Snyderville Basin, and they were only for recreational open space. And so you'll see a lot of properties being conserved over on the Snyderville side, but those, again, public recreation open areas, and those were only those funds could only be used within the Snyderville Basin, could not be used on the east side. When Promontory came into the picture with the development of Promontory, the ESAP came into the picture, and ESAP is the Eastern Summit County Agriculture Protection Coordination. So they were put together to put lands on the east side of the county into preservation of agriculture and open lands, and specifically had to be within either North or South Summit. So we've had two pots of money, two different kinds of rules for a really long time. And then what happened? BOSAC ran out of money. Here's some information. So I'm not going to jump into BOSAC anymore because they're out. They don't have any money. Unless Snyderville Basin runs another fund, they don't have any money for now. The ESAP, however, and if you would like to scan that QR code, that takes us to the website that we have on our county page that gives you more details. We still have about $500,000 left. It's a little bit ebb and flow on how the funding comes in because it's all dependent on development that happens in the promontory area, like I was saying. And one thing that's really important to understand about the ESAP funds is that they are restricted pretty heavily on how much can be put to each project. And so typically these projects are brought to us by partners like Summit Lands Conservancy that are just looking for that extra last minute, that extra piece of funds to get them to the end of what they're working on, because they are limited to the lesser of $250,000 or 10% of the conservation easement appraisal. So there are some restrictions on it. Most typically we do fund about $250,000 per project. And then what happened was OSAC came along, and I would like to say BOSAC, ESAP, OSAC, oh my, because, wow, we've got a lot of conservation groups now. I did try to combine them, and that wasn't something the lawyers liked us to do. So anyhow, so we do have still 3 open space committees, but the one that is mostly functioning is the OSAP committee. And the great thing about that one is that it includes the entire county. This is the first time we ran a countywide bond, and it did pass with overwhelming support in 2021, and that was for $50 million. And when you all realize what your tax bill says and how much your land is worth, you understand that $50 million doesn't buy you a whole lot these days. So we had a challenge on our hands to make sure we leveraged every dollar that we could possibly do. And again, that's where our partners at Summit Lands come in and others. But I did want to just walk through how the OSAC board was put together because some folks don't understand. But we basically used the school district boundaries a little bit, shifted them a little bit to work with watershed boundaries because that made a little bit more sense to us. But you'll see on the slide there, we started with a Western Summit County Advisory Board, a North Summit County Advisory Board, and a South Summit Advisory Board. We did that very intentionally because of the different values that reside in each part of our county. We wanted to capture what those different areas of our county wanted to preserve, and then we brought them together with 3 members of each one of those 3 boards to the master board, which is the OSAC board, and they are still together today. And actually 3 of them are in the room because Wes is also one of our board members as well. So thank you all for your service. So just say that because it's not always easy. But again, it's the first time that we have had a countywide bond, and so these funds can be used regardless of boundary all the way across our county. There are, however, restrictions on how we evaluate the properties that come. This QR code takes you to the OSAC website and gives you more information. There's a lot of clickable links there. You can submit a landowner letter of intent, and then the property goes through an evaluation process with our board. And again, these funds typically, this is not a hard, fast rule, but the council generally will look at the properties if the property has some kind of wetland or water component, if it's on the Weber River, if it has a tributary, if it's got good stock water, if it's got a lot of water rights, they will generally fund about 20% of that cost. If it doesn't, if it's an upland habitat, it still has value, it has pressures from development, they typically look at it about a 10% of the appraisal cost. But again, we have seen both low and high on that, and that is, again, a council decision at the end of the evaluation. But it must meet their criteria, and please don't try to read this all. It is on our website, but I did want to show you how each one of those different groups created their own set of criteria that then were pushed up to the OSAC committee for evaluation. All of them consider water. All of them consider wildlife. All of them consider recreation, just in different ways and different values and how they wanted to look at them. And so we have matrix and evaluation criteria that the committee goes through to evaluate each property as it goes through the process. So what have we done so far? To date, we are looking at 16,721 acres of open space preserved. We have added 2 unnamed properties because we were hoping by today we could, but because of some federal funding freezes, we have not been able to close on those properties. The county money is at the title company. We are waiting for the federal piece to come. So very, very soon, those 2 soon-to-be announces will be coming. But that did tip us over from a 14,000 acre to a 16,000 acre, which I think is quite an accomplishment. And again, thanks to our partners here with Summit Lands Conservancy. But you'll see there's a partnership that's happening between OSAC and ESAP, and it allows us to go for funding on the east side for both pots of money. So the east side properties have a little bit of an advantage over the ones on the west side because they do have that other pot of fund, and we're able to leverage the funds even more. So on this slide, I'll just go into this next one. So what's left with the bond funds? We have spent about $22 million of the bond funds. We have about $14.6 million left. And that is because we're holding about $12.5 million for pending projects. And that does not include the 2 that were on the slide before. Those are additional projects that are coming down the line. And we have some expenses such as title reports and appraisals and stuff like that. And so $1.6 million has been spent on either interest, title reports, appraisals, other administrative fees that have gone forward. But we're doing pretty well. We've put that 14,000 acres under conservation easement for $21.6 million, which is a pretty darn good deal. So you can start seeing intentionally, I use this zigzag because there is a connection. So we go from our advisory committee boards and then our land trusts come in. And I'm not going to speak a ton about that. I'm going to let those guys speak for themselves. But in addition to Summit Lands Conservancy, we work with Utah Open Lands. We've worked with the Nature Conservancy, Trust for Public Lands. There's a handful of land conservancies out there that can assist us with leveraging funding. And then the last piece of the zigzag here is the county manager and council. They're an integral piece of the implementation. They are the final say on the funding. They approve the funding as we go forward. But again, I want you all to realize that we have a council that has a strategic objective that is this. And it's really unheard of to have a council that is so focused on conservation, on agriculture, on rural community, and on preservation. And we should be really proud of our leadership that they have kept this. They have 4 strategic priorities, and stewardship is one of them. And it has been one of them for many years, and it will continue to be one of them, I would see, into the foreseeable future. So to talk through the funding strategy, just really quick, we have to have that willing landowner. So it's you guys in the room. It's you telling your neighbors. It's you leaving your land in a will for this purpose. We have to meet that evaluation criteria. We've got to have the funding, the grants, the leverage, the donation. Summit Lands will jump into some of that as well. And then you have to have the wanting, the willingness to protect your land in perpetuity, because that's really our end game here. And that's what we're trying to do, just to leave that legacy for our kids. I mean, it's just, there's nothing else to say. So go ahead. I'll pass that on to Summit Lands here. We're just going to switch slides really quick.
All right. Thank you very much, Jess. That was a great overview for all the great work the county's doing. We love working with you guys so much, and we appreciate all your work. I'm going to go over conservation easements kind of 101, what we do at Summit Land Conservancy. My name is Lauren Page. I work on the conservation team at Summit Land. So I help with the transactional process of it. I meet with the landowners, visit your property, talk to you guys about how this works, and help raise funds for your property. Also in the room is Kate Saddlemeyer. She is my boss. She is the VP of Conservation and Council. So the really, really hard questions you'll have to ask her. Okay, our high-level overview. So we are a nonprofit land trust. A land trust works to put land under conservation easements. So what we do is we help landowners save their land forever, and perpetuity is what we say. And you save, the things that matter to you, your land, your legacy, and you get financial security. So that's what we do. We work across the Wasatch Back in all 4 Wasatch Back counties: Summit, Wasatch, Weber, and Morgan. We have about 59 properties that we are protecting and just over 19,000 acres. And then our work itself, we are supported through individual donors. So we have some big kind of fundraising events that we have each year. We have 3 main ones. Conservation Breakfast that happens at Deer Valley. That's coming up real soon, this May 14th. We do our big kind of Blue Sky Bash fundraiser August 8th. And then every November we have Live Give as some of you are probably familiar with. And so that's where we have individual donations. So thank you to anyone who has helped contribute to us and really fund us and keep the lights on day to day. Okay, so there's 3 different types of transactions that happen with a conservation easement. An overall thing for a conservation easement is it is a voluntarily, legally binding document that you put that is associated with your land. So this conservation easement is tied to the land itself and stays with the land forever. So even you as a landowner, if you sell the land, the conservation easement stays with the piece of property. It's a title document. And there's 3 types of transactions for conservation easements. One is a straight-up donation, so you can elect to put a conservation easement on your land, and it is not bought or purchased. You still can accrue some tax benefits, but it is just a straight-up donation. The second is a bargain sale. This is the most common. This is where we, as this land trust organization, help fund the conservation easement. So we purchase the easement, and you get money for that. And then the last one is called fee title. This is a rare circumstance, which is the land trust itself. We purchase land and protect it. We have a few of those. One of those is Marchant Meadows. That is a property that is here in Camas Valley. It's a project we're working on to have. It's still agricultural land, and then we will have trails through it. Back there, you can see a little graphic that shows you part of the larger project that it's a part of. But those are the 3 types of transaction. We'll primarily talk about kind of bargain sale, as that is the primary one that we do and the ones that we work with most landowners. Okay, so the outline of the transaction itself is that you, the landowner, you reach out to us. You tell us what's going on your property, why you're interested in a conservation easement, and what your goals are for your family. We go back to our internal organization, we talk through it with the team, and we find out where we can have capacity to start working on your project. Once we do that, then we sign a letter of intent with you as the landowner. This is not a binding document. It's just a document saying we're going to work together for the next foreseeable future to help you get a conservation easement on your piece of property. After that, we as the organization, we apply for funding sources. Most of the time it's federal, and then other places like the county helps us with OSAC and ESAP. And we keep applying for different funding until we get that securement to the right price that works for you. After we get that funding, we can start actually drafting the document. So we draft that legal document, the conservation easement itself, and we also draft what's called baseline documentation. So that's when myself and members of my team come out to your property, we take photos, we do narrative descriptions, we kind of do a fully comprehensive analysis of your property so we understand what it was like at that time we're putting the easement in place. So down the line, we can look back and say, okay, this is how the property looked. These are the things that we're upholding still today. Lastly, after everything's done and closed, you keep your land. The easement is in place. It is protected in perpetuity. It's protected forever. But you continue to use your land as you see fit, as you want to. Okay, so funding itself. So once you decide you want to do this, this is where we come in and we help out. We apply to federal grant programs for funding to help you out. Our largest funding partner is the National Resource Conservation Service, or the NRCS, which is part of the U.S. Department of Ag. And within that, there's couple main grant program sources. One of them is called the RCPP, which is Regional Conservation Partnership Program. There's a lot of acronyms in this industry. So that is a main funding source that we use, and we recently got $22.5 million awarded to our organization last year through this grant program to specifically work on projects in the Camas Valley. So with that, we're actively seeking out landowners and projects to protect more land in the Camas Valley itself. We also have a previous RCPP that we are working on closing out. We got awarded that one in 2019, and that is focused in the larger Summit County as a whole, the Wasatch Back, so land outside of Camas Valley, but we're looking to close that one out hopefully the next year or so. So that's our main funding source, is this federal grant program. Federal money normally comes in at about 50% of whatever that appraisal value is. We can normally fund up to 50% of federal money, and then that's when we get additional funding sources that come in to help create that additional cost. So county helps us out, as Jess did a great job explaining, OSAC and ESAP, where that money comes from. And then we as the organization help apply to a bunch of other little grant sources. NIFWIF, National Fish and Wildlife, has a bunch of grant programs. There's a bunch of state funding foundations that help us out. And then lastly, we just have individual donors. So that's where like the last little bit of funding can help come in to help close these projects in completion. This is kind of an overview of the Camas Meadows Initiative, or CPP, where we're at. The boundary line that you see on there is our boundary for the projects that we're working in. The dark green and light green spots are closed projects that we have in the valley, and then the red are projects that we are currently working on. Currently working on just means we're in the process of acquiring that funding, writing those baselines, getting that information to eventually close the project. Perpetuity and stewardship. So like I talked about, what we do is we do a baseline documentation. That's where we're coming out to document your property in whole. And this helps sets us up for the future. After you're closed, our team and our organization does monitoring every single year. So we have a stewardship staff that comes and they visit with you as the landowner. They talk about where your property is at. They make sure conservation values are being upheld. And they see if you have anything, issues, questions, concerns, anything to move forward with of any changes or issues that are happening. So each year moving forward after it's closed, that's how we continue to stay in contact with you as an organization. So yeah, responsibility is you can hold up those conservation values. Those conservation values include things like agricultural operation being maintained, water quality protected, maintaining wildlife habitat. Those are some generals. You just make sure that those things are being upheld, no unreasonable changes being made to your property. And those are all kind of designated during the conservation easement process itself. So we just check to make sure that those are being held year after year. And you talk to our stewardship staff if there's any issues with that. Okay, some myths and facts overall. Myths, number one, you must allow public easement access. This is not true. If you want to have public access on your property, that is something that we talk about and it's something that you can allow, but it is not something that you have to have. You can maintain private ownership completely and fully. Number two is that conservation easements require significant upfront money for transactional costs, such as titles, appraisals, different things like that. We are not asking anything significant to be paid up front. We help with some of those front costs by looping it into stuff at the closing. On myth number three, you don't get to keep farming your land as you currently are and operating it. After negotiating how you want to see your operation now and kind of towards the future, those operations don't change. You get to keep operating your land as you see fit, as you are doing, as you want your future generations to do so. Lastly, a myth, hunting is prohibited. Again, that's a landowner choice. That's something that we can talk about during the conservation easement drafting process, and it's kind of your choice. So the overall thing is the main myth is I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm limited by this. The government's going to prevent me from doing this on my property. Fact is, you get to pretty much decide what you want to keep doing and how you want to operate your land, and we help ensure that you can do those things moving forward. Some preparation. So in preparation for doing this, some things that are good to have up front and things that we require of when you're doing a conservation easement. All participating landowners, so any member of the entity, if you're in an LLC or trust like that, all the members in that entity have to have an average income below $900,000 a year over a span of 3 years. Some things of that, like income that you wouldn't think of, if you sell a piece of property, that counts as income. So that might kind of bump things up a little bit. Just things to consider when doing this. Secondly, you can't have any mortgages or liens on your property. Thirdly, all the parcels must be under the same entity. So if you have parcels throughout the valley, they don't have to be contiguous, but if they're different parcels, they have to be under the same entity name. You can't have it under different entities. You must have legal and physical access to your property. So if you are not accessible through a public road, you have to have recorded easement access through whatever private road that you have to ensure that you have access. And lastly, water rights associated with the property. It's not always necessary, but we like to have water rights associated with the property so it maintains those values moving forward of I do have water rights that are set up with the property to have that set up for conservation value forever. So those are just some preparation things that landowners can do and think about if they want to put their land on a conservation easement. Okay, that's all I got. We're going to have some landowners come up. We have several landowners in the room. Probably have Wes come up first. Do you want to come first?
Wes Sidaway, representing the Sidaway family. So we put a conservation easement on 73 acres of meadow ground near the Weber River back in 2014-ish is when that closed. We started the process in 2008, started the conversation. So be prepared for that. It's not, if you're looking for a quick turnaround, those don't necessarily happen. They can, but they're rare. So be patient as you start the process. So we did the 73 acres. Luckily for us, we're a smaller family. So I have another sister and a mom and dad. So the family conversations were maybe easier than some might have. But if you're here tonight as a landowner, thank you. Appreciate you considering it. Right? There's really not a lot of options for us out there. You can sell it for development. We can keep doing what we're doing with it, or consider conservation easement. Everything that's been said tonight, I've seen it, witnessed it. Nothing's false that anyone's presented. So there's your truth, Jess, I guess. Yeah. Let's see. Conservation for me, I'll tell you that. I work in construction, so my daily paycheck comes from development. I understand that side of it. I think there's a balance, but I'm heavily supportive of land conservation. So I do understand both sides of that world out there. Any questions you may have right now, just off the bat? I do sit on OSAC and ESAP too, so wanted to give back to this effort after we closed our easement. Been through that process and see a lot of questions that come up.
Yeah. Have you applied for any international impact funds or any other conservation sources of revenue, or only what you've applied for now?
So for our particular 73 acres, we have not applied for any additional funding for that. But we have applied for other funding on some other property we own.
Yes, when you did that 73 acres, seems like there's definitely some dinner discussions about what you do or don't want, or cutting out land maybe for future house for your kid or down the road. I'm just curious, what you put on the conservation, is that it's purely restricted just to what do you do on that land right now? Is it just grazing?
Yeah, so just our cattle operations. Yeah, we raise hay on most of it. We graze it. We have a barn that we do. The barn was existing, so it was a pre-existing structure. It wasn't really talked about much tonight. That is something to know. Up front in the process, you can carve out a piece of ground still and build a building, and it reduces your value, and that has to all be negotiated. But that is possible.
You guys didn't do that.
We didn't carve anything out. No, so whatever is on that property was pre-existing.
Yeah, I should add some clarity to that real quick. Yeah, you're absolutely allowed to have agricultural buildings and operations on your property. That's actually liked and seen in federal funding. They like to see that you have those agricultural structures and things that you're contributing to your operation and keeping it agriculture. So that's definitely allowed
Maybe
in the easement area.
Maybe I'll add a little bit to that. We've done a few improvements over the last few years. Added an irrigation line, redone some culverts, different things like that. So, it's not like you cannot touch your property, right? You can still maintain it. It provides for the agriculture use. We really haven't had any pushback at all for that. So you had a good question?
I was just wondering, is it carve out whether you're taking that land out of the conservation so you could build a house? Is that what you're saying?
You can. Yeah, that is an option.
So that you can't conserve land and then build a house there later.
Right. Definitely, if that's something you're interested in, it needs to be a priority up front and have those discussions.
Yeah, so there's two separate things. So one way you can go is that you can survey out the land. So you can create a separate parcel area that is completely out of the easement, and you could do whatever you want in that piece. The other option is that you can keep the area and keep a building area. We call it a building site. So we designate a building site in the conservation easement area itself, and you're limited to normally a single family home
to build, approve on, do you want in that building site specifically? So you can go either way.
Do barns have to be in building sites?
We put them in agricultural envelopes, but they don't have to be in a building site. Anything with a concrete foundation, that's what we would put in a building site. Anything like not a concrete base, that's just like a structure, agricultural thing that exists on your property.
And the rules that Ron's talking about here, that's kind of related to the federal funding, right? Now, so you're assuming that you're doing a biospheric conservation easement and we're bringing in federal money. And they have these really strict minimums of deep term. I know them inside out and backwards, so they're really tiresome, right? But they're nationwide. It's like one standard nationwide. So there's some rigidity with that.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, the first question is whatever is pre-existing on the piece of property is built into the agreement, right? So if there's a barn on it, all that. The other question is, what if you had two adjoining properties? One family owns one family owns another. If you started at the same time, they are contiguous, but it's two separate. Could they enter into something that kind of keeps those two properties as an island, so to say, so with some of the development coming?
Like enter them both into a conservation easement?
They could be two,
Yeah.
but at the same time, but they're protecting each other is what I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm totally getting rid of your app, but we like to have contiguous parcels. So
Yeah.
we like to have landowners that have neighbors that also want to put their piece under easement. Like very pro having continuous pieces of land under easement.
Or maybe throw in just something to consider. If they're the same family members, but different current ownership.
Yeah, they're completely different, but same desire to keep our land as it is now.
Okay.
There's a big group of us, but at least, I can only speak to people that are touching my properties.
I will say typically larger parcels tend to score better with all the, agencies and funding.
That would store
Kind of water running through it too.
Yeah.
So if you're just kind of off out of the box a little bit, if that group was open to a common ownership.
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
We like each other.
Okay. Very well. Any other questions for me? I'll turn it over to Colby.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
I'm Colby Pace. I represent Half Circle Cross Ranch, Dorothy Blomquist Trust. My grandma just passed away in June, 93 years old. This was a lifelong thing for her to put this in a conservation easement. My granddad died in 1987, so my grandma was a widow for a large amount of her lifetime. But she could see down the road, and she's seen very, very far down the road. And so my grandma, she had we had a family attorney at the time. The family attorney recommended, maybe I'd put it in conservation easement. It's in 2005 was when we started talking. It's a long time ago, 20 years ago, basically. And so by the time 2005 rolled around, application went through, just like these guys have said, the procedure of implementing things and getting appraisals and getting things going. Easement didn't fund until 2011. The easement was, I should back up just a little bit. The property is 2,700 acres. It's 6 miles east of Colville. It's on South Fork, which is out of a corridor here in the Weber. Runs into South Fork, split runs off the Weber off Windy Ridge. We're just below Windy Ridge. Our neighbors are one of our own council members, Tanya Hansen, that's my cousin. I am a Blomquist on my mother's side. And so the roots run really deep. And so back to what happens, my granddad, my great granddad and her great granddad had 10,000 acres in that canyon. And so over time, they done everything to keep it together, and it's still together today. And then there's a little bit of parcel. Our ranch went from, my granddad had two brothers, himself and another brother. And so my granddad died, like say in 87, his brother died in 86. No trust, no will. Components, trouble, right? So long story short, court of law divided it up the road. We took everything on the left-hand side of the road. My cousins, my aunts, my aunt took everything on the left-hand side, right-hand side of the road. She kept a certain portion of hers. Over time, she sold about, she sold about 1,900 acres of her 2,500. And so I thought and I was super young. I'm 14, 15 years old this time. And so I thought that never that those places would ever come back together. And life goes on. Some folks from the Park City area bought the one part of the ranch. A lady run a hunter jumper horse business there at the lodge for a long, long time. He sold his business, moved to Colorado. One of our working relationship people in the wildlife world picked up that. They use it as a hunting lodge. So it's a hunting lodge that landscapes a big portion of the Chalk Creek area. Les Olson Company ended up buying the 1,700 acres above us. Couldn't ask for better people. Went a long time because there was animosity between families. And so we mended all fences basically between all parts. I actually run Tanya's family's ranch. I actually operate that ranch also today, plus our own, plus that. So there's a big corridors there that's pretty protected. There's the Oswald family, Don Blomquist's ranch up in there it's protected also. And so I guess back to my original part is what makes it special for my family is it just in the last week had changed from my grandma's generation to my generation. Wasn't easy. And it wasn't fun. But I'm here to tell you, me and Mackenzie have two sons that are full-fledged in the livestock business. One's a cow guy, one's a sheep guy. And I've made those guys, I've worked with those kids every day, and they're the lifeblood of my operation for the rest of my lifetime. And I think that's what protects the easement, the easement portion to it. I mean, I get pretty choked up about it because it's pretty sentimental to me. Because that's all I've ever known is to ranch and protect the land, be a good steward, be a conservationist, and do all the things that I couldn't be more blessed in my world, in life. And, my family, my family, like my mother, her two sisters, they loved the land, but they didn't have the passion that I had. They didn't work the land because they've had their own stuffs in their life, and they've kind of skipped it. My grandma protected that for a reason. So it wouldn't get umbrellaed out so far that she couldn't put it back together. And so when she put it back together in 2011, she took her funds, and she did very smart business with her funds. She took a huge tax break being a widow and just a ranch that was just operated. The livestock was never a part of the ranch. So it was just the land there, and we own the livestock. Half Circle Cross owns the livestock. So we didn't have any correlation with any problems in the transition of anything in the livestock world. And so, what my grandma done, let us allow to do is we put about 25 miles of pipeline on that ranch. We got about 20 different water resources for cattle, sheep, wildlife, herds, everything wants to come. We fenced that. We've cross-fenced it in about six different pastures. We rotate on a 45-day rotation in that scale, somewhere around in there. We use big numbers for shorter duration of time, and we keep moving along. And a lot of the other things we've done a lot of fish habitat. We also own in the Chalk Creek Thoroughfare too, and we own in the South Fork. So where they meet just below our ranch, where they tie together and head towards Echo. We've done a lot of work with Trout Unlimited over the past decade. We've seen numerous people come from Trout Unlimited and go and come back, and we start all over again and do all those things. But been a great experience for us. A few of the easement holders are a little bit different than Summit Land at the time. My era of time was Ann Price, and I'm sure you guys have heard of Ann Price back in the day. She's kind of an icon in the world of easements. She was kind of my mentor of how to make these things work and do it the right way and everything else. Like I say, we had a good family attorney that had done an easement on his wife's ranch. It's Haines Land and Livestock. People's heard of it. It's just above our ranch, a few miles. It's a good piece of property, nice piece of property. But so it was a lot of demonstrations that, what should you do? What shouldn't you do? The building envelope, I call the building envelope. That's kind of what they used was the terms when we was putting it. So back to a few of the questions, in the building envelope in our structure, we didn't have a lot of infrastructure actually on the ranch. We had a couple hay barns and corrals, the original ranch house, but it's part of that's my aunt's home. And then what we did is we said in section 9, in quote unquote, this area of what could happen in the future is the building envelope that we want to build on or to be able to use as a couple dwellings on that particular spot. So whether it happens, I don't know. maybe not. We hope. But then my grandma got a little bit. I don't know if she got a little bit cold feet, but we had one parcel that was north of the highway. It's 120 acres. But we have some fiber optic buildings on that portion. And so we created, we had to create, you get like Wes, talk about construction, you talk about communication. We felt like that we didn't want to ruin the integrity of the communication world just in case that did expand for some unknown reason. What the beauty part of the parcel is now that parcel is there, it can use as my family's envelope or somebody's envelope to look across the ranch. So my grandma had some visions that was pretty thoughtful. I thought they was crazy, for the first part, but then now looking back 15 years, you're like, there's a reason. I mean, there's a reason why we made land, why we make it work. And I guess the future of the concerns, I've just wrote down a few things, I've talked about my neighbors, but my neighbors are, if you go up the road, you probably run out of the easement part a little bit. But if you go up the South Fork Road, it's always going to be the gateway. There's nobody coming. And that's the best part. It makes my life you sleep at ease when you know that there's not all these people coming. A lot of my background, me and Mackenzie's operation, we have about 30 different landlords. We do a lot of business in a lot of counties throughout the state. We do a lot of business with Nature Conservancy on some Phragmites stuff. And so I guess unlike Wes, he's the construction guy. I'm in the grazing world and the livestock agriculture world. So I get that phone call from my landlord. Oh, we have a possibility we might sell that place. Then I'm always trying to be the deflect of something, that maybe, well, have you talked to some land? Have you talked to these other folks? And so I've always tried to be an advocate for open space or for something that will help our county, because we are we are pinching down at a fast rate, a lot faster rate than I ever thought we would technically be, and so with that said, a couple of the other questions that I had on, I think I touched a little bit on the tax benefit. I mean, you use tax benefit on my grandma's side. I think she used a deduction for about 7 years on the federal, and so that was pretty huge in that world. Let's see. Forest and Fire and State Land is actually who holds my easement today, which there was a lot of partners that was in that also. There was, let's see, look at my notes. Lee Ray McAllister when it was super popular. The state of Utah also, and then ESAP was very first beginning. And so then that's when things were moving along. They was trying to figure out the key ingredients to what could happen and what couldn't happen, from the promontory funds. And so, yes, we did acquire some funds from that also too. So, with everything that's, kind of carried on in our world of a conservation easement, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainties that people worry about their land and stuff. And my personal opinion, I mean, if you can protect it, it's the best protection you'll ever have for the rest of your life, because just like I tell anybody, they're not making no money. Can't buy it off a store shelf. You can't buy it anywhere else. People say, well, you could sold that, and go to Wyoming, or you go across the country. I'm gonna live it out. I am. I'm on a ranch in Summit County until I'm under the dirt. I mean, so I'd like people we have an operation where we live right on the Weber River. Also huge development coming. Ivory Homes is coming all the way around the structure of us. We lease the branches that they're doing. I just have to mind my P's and Q's, go about my business. And like I said, what are you going to do? I was like, well, I love my lunchbox just like I used to love my lunchbox. I'm going to drive up Chalk Creek. And even though all you folks are going to be here when I come back, it doesn't make no difference to me. You're going to see a few more people on the road. I'm going to see a few more people. But once I go behind that gate, I'm not going to see those people. Throughout my day, through everything that I do, I'm not going to run into all those folks and all the stuff. My kids are all raised now, so I don't have to worry about the part of public school world or any of those kind of things. So it's a good life. I mean, it's a good life, and a conservation easement is a very, very important tool in somebody's operation, small and big. I mean, I know a lot of operations that have functioned in Davis County that are very, very small. But that old guy's still out there kicking his bale of hay. He's still out there. Drove by 3 of them today. I mean, I've found these little different places, and people that come and see us, where we're at down there, cabins and cows. So we're movers. So we spend 6 months in the summer range over here, and then we spend 6 months in the winter range. We spend BLM permits. We have BLM permits in the West Deserts. And so we see a lot of different dynamics at the table that all these people, but they all talk about the same word: conservation, stewardship, and everything. And it doesn't matter how broad, how big, how little, they all talk about the same thing. So with that, I don't know if any other questions. If you guys got any questions for me, I'll be glad to answer them. Yes, sir.
So with these easements, has that enabled you to maintain your agricultural business? And without that, would you still be able to? And I'm just speaking so my great-great-grandfather was the first fishing game warden of the state of Utah. He came across the river.
Okay.
I have family members buried in the Colville Cemetery. And I have family in Cass County.
Yeah.
And they all had to leave agriculture.
Yeah.
So is this the only way for future for agriculture in Summit County?
Well, the hard question of that is just like everybody's. Now, me, I've structured a business module that my answer is yes, that I can survive and I can make this operation function. But I do a lot of other dynamics that the general guy does not do. You know, I just do multiple things that are, that either try to bring in revenue or try to make things work. Just there's a fella sitting here in front of me right here. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. His diversification to an operation is the most functional contribution to an operation today. So what we've had to do to that question, and then I'll get back to the other part, is we've implied intensive grazing. Okay. We've employed rotational grazing. We've played cover crops, soil health. I'm sure there's a few more missing, but those are some things that
Your water lines.
yeah, my water lines. So I could go back to that real quick. That water line system. So my granddad, the whole time, we can only run 70 cows up there, and we're going to be out of water by July. Well, so what did I do? I run 70 cows up there and pushed them up the mountain. They beat you back 2 days later. So it's like, well, as time went on, I went to different things, went to different meetings. I went to different structures. I learned from different folks all over the world. I had an opportunity that probably broke my rut I sit on actually an ESAP board, the national ESAP board for the National Cattlemen's Association. And so I was on that for 3 years. And so I got to go to different states and do a lot of different things. Well, there was a lot of things, that was getting pretty popular buzzword in the soil health, water quantity, water quality, all these buzzwords were popping up. Well, then there's a guy named Jerry Doan, and Jerry Doan's in the Dakotas. And he's like, well, the only way that we survive is through cover crops and water lines. And we're like, well, what do you mean? Well, we run 5,000 yearlings on X. I said, there's no possible way. There's no possible way. Well, I go back home and I start thinking about the solar. So I have 9 sets of solar systems around the ranches I have, not only on my own ranch, but all the ranches that we lease. So it's encumbered a huge part of my livelihood to make, relative income to keep my operation functioning. And so by doing that 2,700 acres turned into 200 yearlings for 45 days to 5 months. I wish I had to bring my slide. If you do the calculation of those numbers on cash revenue, it's pretty substantial. But I had to integrate that with how I do it. So if you're doing some grazing over here and you're using sheep over here and you're using, we got a place that, that might be doing some timbering, and so PJ, we worked a ton with PJ Abraham over the years, and I mean, he's done my evaluation on my place every year since he started. And so, and Mike Erickson was doing it before him. So anyways, I mean, they've always added a little piece of gospel every once in a while. Said, oh, hey, have you seen this? Or had to send me a little blurb once in a while. And so I check it out. I could probably do that. So I've had to be real innovative to do it. Now, if you flip the other side of me on the pay side, my dad's side, totally opposite. They still do the same thing. They work the same way and they do a good job at it. But I've had to reverse the part to make this work. So back to, I was a little long there telling you, but as far as somebody to make it work, if you can put it in the conservation easement, it came from a family, you can still keep it operating, you retire from a great job, you go back and you support your bad habit with a good farm, good ranch, good recreation, whatever it is. You want to ride bikes on it, you want to fish on it, whatever you want to do. There's 1,000 ways to look at it. But like, for instance, to me, these ranches that I rent or manage or do things for these folks, they're, they're spot on to everything that they look at as we all have the same goals at the end of the day. And so we try to achieve all of the same goals if it's possible. Oh, there's been a few, you meet your matchmaker and you have to figure a way. I mean, you figure a way to help them, and that'll help you, and so it all comes around in full circle. But like I say, I've been fortunate enough to be able to do what I've got to do every day, and that's what I'm going to keep doing until I wear out.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think that's wonderful. I just wanted to I heard a couple of themes as we were going. I just want to sum up what we heard. It's going to take time. Okay, we heard that from both of them. And we heard that there is flexibility, but you have to have a vision up front. And so it's really important if you're going to take this step to really think about it. This is forever. This is in perpetuity. So put some thought to it before you jump. Make sure that you're getting the things out of this that you want and you need. And then just the other thing that Colby just touched on, which is an interesting one I've never brought into the conversation, but your access to innovation. Because you're part of the system, the people who are monitoring so part of a conservation easement is you get a yearly monitoring. And, Summit Land staff is at the cutting edge of what's happening now. And you might not be, but you can get exposed to those things. And, PJ Abraham, who works for the Forestry Fire State Lands Office, he gets yearly conversations with somebody who's, his job is to think about innovations to improve land, and we'll share those information. So I like that point. So thanks for bringing that up. Did you want to add anything else?
Well, I just want to.
I guess I add one more thing about PJ. And I can't. Oh, Natalie. It's Natalie, right? His boss, isn't it?
Natalie Conlon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, they did all the imagery was through satellite this year. That's how mine. He says, yeah, where's the test yuppie for that? And yes, sir.
That's what my company does.
Well,
Third party carbon credit, carbon stewardship verified.
Yep.
ISO certified. We spoke at a World Economic Forum in Davos.
Yep.
At the conservation in Dubai.
Yep.
And we're Park City based. So the reason I'm here is to help you guys qualify for even more revenue from regenerative agriculture and preserving for your pet.
I'll touch on that just a small fraction, and then me and him are going to go visit over there.
Gotcha.
But I have inquired, and I have done just some due diligent homework, and so actually as part of McKinley Smoot, McKinley and me, we had visited about this a few years back, and then Greg Simons, me and Greg had visited about this. So me and Greg every once in a while get these random phone calls to each other, and we talk about these. Because he's like an iPhone to me, and so I talk about all these things, and he's like, well, what about this? What about this? And so then all my wheels start turning. So then it's pretty interesting to see that I've tried to surround myself around folks that have achieved things that have made possible for those purposes. But yeah, that's the new giddy up. It's the carbon world too.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I want to, thank everybody for the conversation here. It's, fascinating to me personally. Just to kind of sum up a little bit what we do. We work 3 springs, and we are kind of on the cutting edge. We do, hear about the new things to kind of with regenerative agriculture and different ways, to make agriculture viable. Our nuts and bolts, what we really do, conservation easement funding, I just want to kind of sum up on where we're at in the world. We have, the federal government is our primary source. As Laura said, they're funding 50 to 75% of the conservation easement transactions. We have our organization, we have some kind of earmarked designated money still, specific to the Camas Meadows. We're here in the Camas Meadows, so I'm kind of mentioning our RCPP now. those funds, it's kind of a little bit frozen, but kind of not. We're still, these things are trickling through. We're still doing transactions. That's kind of the state of where we're at. I don't think anybody else has asked this question, so if you're interested in what we call a bargain sale transaction, which is where you're looking to, I think everybody kind of gets what what that is right now, where you're donating a portion of your conservation easement value, but you're also there's also a purchase price. It's like a regular real estate transaction. Feel free to reach out to us. We have had some success in that field. It's a long time. It's really hard work. Federal government is not in a great place right now, but it's still kind of moving a little bit. So, reach out to us, Summit Land Conservancy, or reach out to Jess as well. We work quite closely together. So you either start with the county with the NOI process, or reach out to us at Summit Land Conservancy. We'd love to talk to you. We're still doing things, and then if you have any other kind of different ideas of doing things as well, we're pursuing those options also. So, I want to thanks for bringing us together, county. Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Rachel.